back, hopefully back live with you. Hopefully,
welcome to the world of everything on the internet.
Exactly. And hopefully, you're still with us. And, we did a lot of introductions there, but let's just bring Toni right in and start discussing the healing powers of hip hop.
But I do encourage you to go to YouTube and to type in "Why Worry" Blackman, so you can see the video for yourself.
Exactly. In fact, I'll play that at the end to lead us out. So great to have you here, Toni. We Toni and I met a few years ago. I've been just a massive fan of hers, and and your work as a Cypher facilitator, but so much more. And I think it did get cut off, so it's well worth to read your bio out for everybody, and let people know, who you are, and you could see on the crawl your website and where to get at you on Instagram and Facebook. But Miss Toni Blackman, she's a social entrepreneur, Cypher facilitator, social arts activist and advocate, director and producer, who was the first hip hop artist selected to work as a cultural ambassador with the U.S. Department of State. She's currently is an Alumni Outreach Director for Next Level Hip Hop Diplomacy Project, and her new book, Wisdom of the Cypher, will be released January 21st on Red Sky Present, which I cannot wait for that to come out, as I'm sure you are too. So welcome, Toni. It's good to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
How you doing? You're busy.
I am busy, but guess what? I'm the good kind of busy. I'm the working artist kind of busy. I'm the creative projects are popping and happening kind of busy in the middle of a global and racial pandemic. I am grateful. I am blessed. I am fortunate. And I am hella tired.
Yeah, thank you for being here.
Amen, sister. So thank you. It is great for you to join us, especially amidst all these projects. So we really do appreciate your time. So I'm going to start with the first question. So could you describe for our audience what the Cypher is and how you use it as a space of healing and transformation?
Well, the Cypher, first of all, my book is coming out let's say first quarter, 2021. I have a couple of pieces I have to complete, 3 more pieces that I have to complete. But I'm really excited about Wisdom of the Cypher coming out because I've been thinking about the concept of the Cypher for 25 years.
25
years, yo. It's been a long time, but the Cypher represents 360 degrees. It's about completion of thought, giving and exchanging energy, information, and ideas. The Cypher is 0 and the sum of all things at the same time. The Cypher is the circle. Legendary pop master Fable taught me many, many years ago that we've been ciphering for centuries. It's a part of our human existence. It's the Cypher's a circle. We pray in ciphers, we dance in ciphers, we drum in ciphers, we eat in ciphers, we teach in ciphers. And so it just made absolute sense that hip hop, which is an artistic culture, form of expression, whether it be rapping or dance, we come together in the Cypher. And that's what the Cypher is. The etymology of the word comes from the Islamic sect, the 5 percenters, which had a huge impact on hip hop music and culture. And that part of the culture is not discussed enough when we're thinking about a lot of language, a lot of the words, even some practices and beliefs come directly from that religious practice in that community. And the word Cypher is just that, one of those things. But I do remember 20 years ago, I was in Washington State. And at Olympia College, my former intern had booked me for a speaking engagement when she was there completing her degree. And there was an elderly Black woman from Louisiana that came up to me and she was like, well, Miss Toni, that was a nice little talk. And I liked that little rap that you did. But we used to have ciphers at the church when I was a little girl and my grandma would go. And so she told me this whole story about how there was a fellowship at the church and it was like a code word for party.
Right.
But I just thought it was not, it's probably not a coincidence that in both instances, Cypher is related to spirituality.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, Cypher as just an archetype for life, as a circle, and what we do and how we commune together on a day-to-day practice, but with the various arts at the center of that transformation that can happen.
Yeah, and I think it speaks to one of the themes that Teddy's book brings up, which of course again is what inspired the series, which is not making these artificial distinctions between the spiritual and the religious and the secular and the everyday, right? It's like you said, the cipher happens in every day. The cipher can be this, the cipher can be that. It's happening all around us.
Yeah, and we'll see in pop culture often various ciphers in the entertainment world, but they seem like it's coming from a place of ego or in a place of which is part of it, but not fully, not the full essence of it. Could you talk a little bit about that, where the difference between the two in your mind of what the purpose of the cipher is? It's not necessarily about ego, but it's about that group energy.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot, about the fullest expression of the cipher. And what does the fullest expression of a cipher really represent? What does it mean to have a pure cipher? And if I'm speaking about a pure cipher, am I being a hip hop purist? Because no one likes purists. And I just remember when I was younger, I couldn't stand those hip hop purists. You can't do this, you can't do that. And so now, when I'm reflecting on what's significant and important about the cipher, I'm unapologetic about the idea that the cipher is about bringing people together. One of the ground rules we had developed in the Freestyle Union Cipher workshop, which I started in 1994 in Southeast Washington, D.C., we had ground rules. We had, I think it was 4 ground rules. Don't kill me if I just say 3. But one was the B whole thing, the B word, whole, that was not a discussion and it was not a debate. If that's what you were into, there was no argument. It's just that you could not do it in the cipher.
Right.
There. And then another rule was no written rhymes. You had to freestyle. You had to improvise. And I became an advocate for improvisation because of my experience on the speech team at Howard University. I paid for college as a scholarship competitor in the forensics team, competing in individual events, poetry, prose, drama, as well as persuasive and informative speaking, and impromptu and extemp.
Yeah.
And it was in impromptu and extemporaneous competitions that I avoided for 3 years. Then I was forced to do when a teammate overslept, and I had to do it. And I was so afraid, like sweaty palms, loss of appetite, and everything. But I ended up performing because I knew the technique. And I had a coach that made it mandatory for scholarship competitors to learn the technique. So even in a state of fear, with resistance, I still made finals because I knew the technique. And
Nice.
so envision, I'm like, imagine if a bunch of MCs, a bunch of rappers knew the technique. That would automatically decrease the necessity for overly aggressive lyrics, for disrespecting women, and for just a basic lack of creativity. Because a lot of what happens is it comes out of not having vocabulary, not having access to creativity, not having enough lyrical skill, not understanding technique. So people do what they're familiar with, and what they're familiar with is what they've heard on the radio, and that's it. It's not that they want to do that only. It's just that that's all they got. And so how do we create a safe space in a cipher, in a pure cipher? The space is safe enough for the heads who don't have good skills, who have low vocabulary, to be who they are and to be creative and to take risk and to try something new and to mess up and to make mistakes. But when the business, the over commodification of the culture happens and occurs, and the only way this is meaningful is if it sells 1 million of this, or if it generates this many views, then we lose the essence of it. Now, I'm not saying that's not important. I'm right now during the shutdown learning, increasing my business acumen.
Right.
Like that is my first, my commitment, heightening my own access to my creativity so that I can sell and monetize what it is that I offer the world. But underneath that is integrity and intention and understanding what my purpose is in the Cypher. And the purpose of the Cypher is to create a space where we all feel better once we leave it. That's it.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be a rapper to be in a Cypher, but you need to know how to rap. You don't have to want to become Jay-Z to be in a Cypher, but you rap. And I say this to a lot of heads. You didn't start rapping because you wanted to be Jay-Z. You started rapping because it made you feel good. Why did you forget that?
Yeah.
And why do we allow, I guess, powers that be to tell us that, you know, you're 30 now, you can't rap anymore?
Yeah, I'd say a little bit about that because I think it's an important aspect in terms of, and, you know, Kate and I were just goofing around with, you know, me feeling my age. You know, I got the pandemic hair growing and it's looking, you know, it's looking a little stringy and balding. It's not my youth hair that was when I got long. It was.
And I was telling him I'm combating both wrinkles and acne, which seems really unfair.
But fighting that age it seems to me it's like it's fighting the messages we're told in our society that growing old is not valued, and yet rapping shouldn't be limited to young folks. You're saying that, like, man, be 85 and do it. Like, you got that voice.
Yeah, and I think the one of the challenges is you have, you know, I think a friend of mine, she joked, she says, you're gonna have a whole bunch of old men pissing their wives off because they think they're gonna get a record contract, a record deal. And I'm like, no, see, but that's the other twisted side. That's the only way for you to be successful.
Right.
That's not, like, how do we redefine success for ourselves? Like, success is happiness, success is peace, success is good health, success is joy. Yeah. Success is being able to be good at your craft and understand it. For you, like I was at one school, I think it was UNC, and I was talking with the students and I said, you know, what happened to the sing-along, right? Like when you look at the old movies and back in the day, you see the stories, people used to sing when they got together. They would sing songs, somebody would play music. And nowadays it doesn't happen enough. We act like it's corny or it's weird. And I remember being in Barcelona at the World Social Forum, and my friend and I, we went out to dinner and we were eating, and then a song came on the radio that everybody knew. And then 40 people were all singing the song with no shame.
Nice.
And I was like, I'm leaving America. I'm leaving because I want to join in too. Right. But I feel like the Cypher should be like that. We should be able to Cypher at your wedding reception. You know?
Right. We should.
Yeah, I hear you.
And just because.
Yeah.
Because it makes us feel good. Because of the healing powers of music. Because music takes our stress away. Music, your voice, honoring your voice allows you to relax and allows us to be more connected with one another.
You know, you and I had talked a little bit about, you know, in our one-on-one conversations about your history in Oakland, being a little girl and experiencing Black biblical culture that was, you know, kind of a lot of from New Orleans that transplanted up into Oakland, and how seeing the Cypher before the church, like meaning that the ladies in all black would get together and they would be doing church before the church, and that kind of speaking in tongues and speaking improvisationally. Tell us a little bit how that experience influenced you.
First, I I don't know if it's it's a regular artist gathering that the choreographer, Professor Giselle Mason, I'm a part of a piece she's been developing. It's a long haul artist development piece of this bigger production that is now longer because of COVID. And it's with Black women, but two of the women and her mother were on, and they said, two of the women said, look, you got to acknowledge the small towns. You're not from New Orleans, right? So it's Louisiana, not New Orleans.
Nice. Thank you.
It was Bunkie, Marksville, and Shreveport are where my folks were from. So I just want to clarify that.
That's important. Land is important.
Louisiana folks who will say, wait.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, where a lot of the Black Americans who migrated to California, their families migrated from Louisiana and East Texas and a few from Mississippi. But the bulk of the folks in the Bay Area that I have met, their families were from Louisiana. And Sundays meant good music. Sundays meant good food. And in Pittsburgh, California, 30 miles east of Oakland, Sundays meant something to do. And, it was Sundays could be a long day. But I'm going to tell you, I looked forward to, the fashion show and with the elders and the hats and any performances, the old school Southern Baptist preacher who would do like this and yes. And there was something so beautiful about the timbre of his voice and the theater of it all. But I would go to church early sometimes with my grandma and for devotion. And devotion was church before church. And you would get there before the people were there. And so you could smell all the cleaning supplies, the Avon perfume, and the lights would be low or off, and the sun coming through the stained glass windows. And the old folks would be moaning, oh, yes. Yeah, I went by the riverside, yeah. And so they'd be moaning these songs. Sometimes you could barely understand the words, but you felt every single one. And I remember people crying. I remember people shouting. I remember people rocking back and forth or side to side. I remember the intensity of the moment and of those times. And I remember being a little girl, my legs swinging back and forth, watching all of this and taking it in, sitting next to my grandmother. And it's so funny. I didn't remember this until I was in conversation with Michael. Okay. So he was interviewing me and he was asking me all these questions and I started talking. So all these years of me talking about hip hop,
yeah,
it wasn't until a few years ago in my life I realized this is what I've been striving for in the Cypher. The energy I've been seeking to create is that feeling I got at 6 years old, sitting in devotion in St. Mark's Baptist Church on Carpino Avenue in Pittsburgh, California. Period. It's that feeling, and it was the energy and the vibration. And honestly, I haven't felt it many times outside of DC. There was an era in DC in the 90s, which was a different time. Also, DC was a different place. And we met, and we were all young in our 20s, early 20s. And then there were teenagers also there. And we would meet for a year and a half. We met every Monday night just to freestyle. Like a gym, like a dojo, like church itself. We would just be there to freestyle. And the Cypher grew over time to have structure. I started taking the proverbs from the impromptu speech competitions. Patience is a virtue, a flame in the heart leaves smoke in the mind. So you would have to, Kate, you would take a flame in the heart leaves smoke in the mind. Michael, you would take patience is a virtue, and then you would spit and you would break down the meaning of those proverbs in your rap on the spot. And then adding different freestyle exercises over time. And so the MCs that came, that like they developed a sort of lyrical superiority to the point where when we would do performances in places, some people would be like, they lying, they're not improvising, because that's how good it was. And then everybody got to know each other's nuances so well that you could pick up from this person and pick up from that person to the point where you would think it was rehearsed, although we hadn't seen each other in 7 days or 10 days or 2 weeks. And but that all was rooted in, the roots are from the church. And then there were some of the MCs there who also grew up in the church. And then there was a guy who grew up with, there was an MC by the name of Kokai and his friend Toni Lee, Reverend Toni, who became Reverend Toni Lee, who is like a huge reverend now, who has go-go church services and hip-hop church services. And he's just this progressive, badass, spiritual leader. Reverend Toni Lee was always there. And it was significant now when and I'm just remembering this in this moment, when Biggie died. I can't remember, was it Tupac died first and then Biggie? I can't remember.
I want to say it was Biggie first. Do you
I want to say Biggie first. Yeah.
I want to say it was Biggie first, yeah.
So when Biggie died, we had a Cypher that same day scheduled. And when people came, it was at the location that changed from Southeast DC. It was on U Street at a place called the Kaffa House. And I remember everybody coming in, like the weight. You could feel the energy. It felt like a funeral Cypher, sort of, you know? And there was a very young MC who was in high school at the time by the name of Black Indian. And his heart, like that day, was on his sleeve. And then there were 3 or 4 of them, like their freestyles were just so, and I knew at that moment, Toni, you got to be better about documentation. You need to have cameras here. You need to have this. But it was happening. And it was a moment, and he came so hardcore with his freestyle. And I remember Toni, I don't know if he was a minister yet or in training to be a minister, but he had to intervene in a ministerial capacity, because the space and that moment demanded that we needed guidance for the collective in that moment. Hearts were broken, and there was the young male energy that didn't have a vehicle for how to mourn a hero. And so it's just I don't know the last time I've been to church for real, but it's ever present. It's ever present. It's ever present within me. And even in the freestyle ciphers, some of the topics came from scripture, but it wasn't just scripture from the Bible, but it was also from the Quran, you know? And I don't think anyone was ever ashamed of that. But we also were very clear that interfaith respect was important. So that was also very, very important.
Yeah, thank you. We have about 20 minutes left, so I want to make sure that we do have our audience has time to chime in. So because I kind of feel like greedy because we kind of had you to ourselves. And so,
I put it in the chat.
Should be nice and share.
Yeah, people can ask questions.
So should we go ahead and see if there are questions, Mike, or should I go ahead and ask?
There's no questions yet. I just kind of threw up there.
Okay, so I'm going to ask another question, Toni, if that's okay. So as we all know, you were the first hip hop ambassador for the State Department. Yeah. And as you know, and as all of our watchers and listeners know, we just had this little thing happen called an election in the United States. So what I was wondering is kind of, and you can answer both of these questions or just one, is that we also have, a president elect who's Biden, who's indicated that he wants to heal, the nation. And then, of course, the vice president elect is a woman who's both, Black and of Asian descent, right? And so one question has to do with how you see your role as a facilitator of healing and as somebody who's had, connections with federal agencies. How you see your work kind of moving the nation forward in this moment of healing. But then the second part, which again, you can ignore or answer, is I couldn't help but wonder, as you were talking about the fact that people say, what old people, y'all getting into this, people said that about women too at one point, right? Like, when MC Light and Queen Latifah, Salt and Pepper, all these people, they're like,
we've been here for 3 hours. We'll be here for
Yeah,
3
you
hours.
ain't supposed to rap. What are you doing? Right?
I got my
So,
woman stories, yes, with the
yeah,
Cypher.
so you can answer either of those. You can do them in reverse. You seem to be, because so if you want to answer either one of those parts, that'd be great. And then we'll see if anybody has a question in the chat.
Well, I think that there are so many hip hop ambassadors now in an official capacity. And I was the first. I was a sort of guinea pig. I was a guinea pig. And but now there's a comprehensive hip hop diplomacy strategy that's probably been thrown out the window the last 4 years. But hopefully we'll be able to restore the progress. And
yeah.
But there are a lot of artists who are now capable and ready and able. Nigga Def Senegal in the building in the chat. So there are a lot of folks who could do this work and who are capable. And then I'm also thinking about not only the MCs and the dancers, but there are also DJs who are brilliant. There's a DJ in New York named Manny Faces who has a whole podcast, a hip hop advocacy podcast, where he's a hip hop head, hip hop DJ, and he approaches all of these issues from a hip hop slant. I think Jay Smooth, who was a legendary DJ on WBAI, who had a show called The Underground Railroad for a long time. And Jay Smooth also still has the capacity. What was the Ill Doctrine, his regular series. But so there's a lot of brilliance in hip hop. There are hip hop scholars like Tracy Salisbury, and there's so many. I'm like, who use politics and scholarship, and who are really effective at it. A lot of the work I do around diplomacy uses the art and the culture to build unity and to build community, and to inspire folks to focus on different social causes. A lot of my work is around literacy or HIV awareness or gender violence prevention, not as much the political system, if you know what I mean. Yeah, a lot of humanitarian and service work. But I'm confident as long as he goes and gets out the way, that things can happen. And I think for women, there's a big shift for women in hip hop happening right now. Misogyny is still ever so present. We can witness that through the way Megan Thee Stallion has been treated with the recent situation that has happened. And we can also witness it by there are some really phenomenal women MCs who, if the MC Rhapsody was a man, she would be a superstar by now.
Right.
And
Right.
She's not, because she's not a man. And so those are the conversations that sometimes they're difficult to have. I think that hip hop has never had its reckoning in terms of the Me Too movement. A lot of hip hoppers have gotten away up until now. I don't know what's going to happen. And there's still the suppression of women's voices, the suppression of women's leadership, and in the business. And there's only so much women are allowed to say, because it's business and women need their jobs too, and they're trying to make their money too. And so how do women strategically own their power and stand in their power is going to be the test that we'll see, going forward. But it's kind of challenging to like tackle all of these issues while you're in the midst of literal survival and global pandemic.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it looks like we do have 2 questions in the chat now.
Yeah, we got you got the author himself, This Got Funky or What? Dr. Teddy Burgh asking, this is incredible. Thank you so much, Toni. Do you think that today's youth connect and respect the early roots of rap, say with Pigmeat Markham, Cab Calloway, Rudy Ray Moore, and others? These prophets are so important and hopefully will never be forgotten.
That's a tough one. I think when we're looking at what's going on with hip hop right now, I think there's some of the architects of the culture who I've heard in recent years own up to the marks that they missed. in terms of not passing the baton properly. And how do we get that time back? I don't know. How do we heal that? I don't know. I do know that one of the things the generations have to do, the older generation has to be less judgmental and more open. One of the reasons why my workshop is so effective is because the ground rules accept people for who they are and where they are. And so I have the basic ground rules of respect around battling and not disrespecting women. But other than that, everything is on the floor. And it's through the exercises and the techniques that they then go on higher vibration, higher vibration, higher vibration, higher vibration. And so I know I have strategies. I know other women who have strategies to protect the roots of that, to make sure they know who a Cab Calloway is, and in terms of art and craft. But as a woman, it has been very challenging for me to be able to implement my vision and my ideas. And I can say that there are even men who I think of as good guys in the business or good guys in the culture who they give a lot of shout outs to their male friends and their male colleagues. They give very few to women. And so there's that, I think, as a woman leader, innovator, social entrepreneur, builder, that's something that I'm finally being authentic about and honest about. That indeed, I could have handled things differently. I could have had a greater business acumen. I could have been more effective as a leader with the implementation of my projects. But I also was not supported nor affirmed. And I'm in a space now where I'm just so grateful that I feel vibrant enough to be able to continue doing my work with the wind beneath my wings and the momentum of the last 2 decades. And it's actually where I'm actually grateful for the shutdown, because the shutdown put me back on path to fulfill my destiny. And I think prior to the shutdown, I was too busy. And so, yeah.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about because you talked about the moment at Freestyle Union where after Notorious B.I.G.'s passing and the powerful kind of almost unconscious eulogy that seemed to have taken place. Many folks, whether it be DJs, I remember hearing DJ Shadow talk about, choosing records as if the spirits of the ancestors of music were calling for them, and this just happens to fit with this. Kendrick Lamar talks about, when he's up there freestyling, that it's ancestral, the spirits talking through him, that it's not him anymore, that it's the history. And that feels to me very important connection and a tie between, both Black biblical culture we're talking about, but also decolonization and everything about the struggles and the suffering of peoples on earth who have been the most victimized from colonization, and that hip hop seems to be this vessel again for to be able to access not only who you are in a moment, but a history going back to kind of even if you don't know it, it's there.
Yeah, wait, I would tell you what, Michael, you're so true, because when I went to Senegal, shout out Senegal in chat. When I went to Senegal, the first trip, and I was approached by 2 elderly men, and they were dressed traditionally, and they came over to me and they brought a translator, and they wanted to acknowledge me for bringing rap back to its home. And it was just the deepest moment, because so many people were like, what are you going to do traveling by yourself? You're a young woman. You're going to be in a Muslim country with old West African Muslim men. How are they going to treat you? So they had this thing. But when I tell you, they stood around me, and I felt as if they were literally lifting my soul up.
Yeah.
They expressed gratitude. And there were certain things that I wasn't aware of. I remember a woman coming to the Freestyle Union Cypher workshop when it was in DC, and she says, "Oh, I really appreciate the rituals you put in place." And I was like, "Rituals?"
Rituals, yeah.
And she was like, and she looked at me, she was like, "Oh, she don't even know." Bless her heart. But then she broke it down for me. And I was like, oh, so the lighting, scenting the room, playing a Tribe Called Quest instrumentals when people walked in. We were really just playing jazz.
Yeah.
Jazz, a little bit of a beat. And so I would pick Jay Dilla, you know, that was jazz. I was playing jazz, and they were sampling Ron Carter and Weldon Irving and other legendary folks who were being sampled. And she broke it all down to me. And then this woman on the way back, I was leaving Senegal to Ghana, and she was at the concert, and she was on the plane with her daughter, an African-American woman. And she talked to me about what freestyling really was. And when you begin to channel and improvisation, and when you get open. And I ended up going to McGill University to speak, and I cannot remember the man's name. It's a conference all about improvisation. But he looks at he studied the mysticism of improvisation. And there was a lot going on in my life at that time. And then these PhD people were approaching me, and I was like, no.
Those damn PhD people.
But I had the most beautiful conversations. Well, they were trying to recruit me into PhD programs. I was like, I'm traveling the world.
Yeah. I got other stuff to do.
I don't blame me either.
That was good. But it was this. But he really blew my mind because he helped acknowledge some of what I felt but couldn't articulate. I remember touring as an artist with Craig Harris, the trombonist, and Craig Harris is a highly acclaimed musician, composer, and he had attracted the best. He had a drummer that was a 17-year-old prodigy. His bass player had played with Prince. His guitarist had played with James Brown. And then he had the sing drummers who were descendants of master drummer Doudou Ndiaye Rose in Senegal. And I did some dates with them, and it was up north. I don't know if we were in Canada or at the border, but I was doing gigs with him, and he told me I was on 6 songs. And he was like, on these 3 songs, you're going to do spoken word. And on these 3 songs, I want you to rap. I didn't have anything written down. He wanted me to improvise. He wanted the energy of what came out of me when I improvised. And when he would do, he would talk to me in my ear. He would have his horn, and he'd be on stage, and he'd tell me when to come on stage. He's like, okay, ease in. All right, baby. All right, take it up, babe. Take it up. And I was like, it threw me off the first 2 nights because I'm like, can he not see that I am trying to rap?
Right.
Why are you talking to me?
Right.
But I got used to it, and he was treating me like an instrument. He had all these different places, the singer, the musicians, the drummers. And then I started to get so open that it would take me 2 or 3 hours to come down.
Wow. Yeah.
We got back to Harlem. I was living in Harlem that year for 2 years. I felt fingertips on my shoulders for like 2 or 3 weeks. And nobody could tell me what it was.
That's amazing.
The old musician, and one said, no, that's why, our place is such and such. And everything they said to me was not helpful.
Right.
So it was suggested I smoke some weed, go on vacation. None of it was helpful to me. Where are these fingertips coming from? And what is happening? Am I crazy? Mm-hmm. And it was in that moment that I understood why so many musicians ended up as drug addicts. And it had died of tragic deaths. And it was a whole nother level of kinship with artists and those of us who are on this planet to create. And I shut down. I think I shut down for about 5 to 7 years. I was afraid to get open. It wasn't conscious. Looking back, I could see, I had a phase of whackness. You know what I mean? Yeah. And mediocrity because I was afraid of what the world would do to me if I was that open.
Yeah. And we do have a couple more questions in the chat, and if we could beg everybody's patience, and if maybe we could go to like maybe 8:40, maybe to get everybody's questions. But so there's 3 here. So do you want me to read them all to you, Toni, or just one at a time?
Just one, yeah.
One at a time. Okay. So one of them, well, actually, I will put 2 together because you might be able to answer them together because they're both pretty short. So one is, who were some of your kind of artists that you looked up to as a kid? And then the other one, as you were growing up. And then another question from Day Dafa says, how do I get my 90-year-old mom to appreciate hip hop? Right. So as you were growing up, there were people you loved, right? How do you get some of those people you loved, maybe a 91-year-old woman, right, to appreciate some of these hip hop artists that you loved? Yeah.
Well, I think, for me, I started out loving Gil Scott-Heron. It was in my mom's record collection, my auntie's record collection, and my grandmother had Oscar Brown Jr. records.
Mm-hmm.
And I would listen to Martin Luther King albums. I was a special kid who watched PBS all the time as an 8-year-old. But I loved listening to Gil Scott-Heron speak, and I think that's why spoken word has resonated with me so clearly.
Mm-hmm.
My aunt and my mom took me and my cousin to see For Colored Girls by Ntozake Shange. And I remember the stage, and then I remember the sounds and of the music. My aunt would listen to the smooth jazz that people ended up sampling during my era of hip hop. And so the Michael Franks and the Gary Bartz and Tom Brown, there was Ronnie Laws, there was all these artists. And so that music lived within me. I do believe if I had been born 10 years later, I would have been a DJ. And I would have had a 5,000 record collection.
Right.
Because I love music that much. But it was just not something a girl was supposed to do. And I think hip hop wise, I absolutely love LL Cool J's album, I'm Bad.
Oh, yeah.
Classic. What a great album.
Yeah.
That was everything
Awesome.
to me. And I had a boombox. And the big yellow and black boombox.
Mad D batteries.
Girl.
Right, gym class heroes. Mad D batteries.
So it was. I mean, there was the LLs, and of course there was Roxanne Shante and Sparky D and all of them. And then I got really focused on hip hop in the late '80s and '90s. And that was everybody from Rakim to Salt and Pepper, and there was so much good hip hop.
Mm-hmm.
During the time, Public Enemy, Chuck D, and then the Tribe Called Quest, and De La Soul, that whole Naked Tongues crew, really represented a part of my soul.
Yeah. Do you think a 91-year-old woman could appreciate these things? How could you get?
There's so many ways, because I've been teaching teachers and educators and nonprofit leaders. I taught foster care workers and people who worked in independent living program through my aunt who recently passed. And we had all ages in there. And I think that one of the keys is to find messages that would resonate with them, to find rap that's not too fast, to identify rap that includes elements of music that they actually appreciate.
Right.
Or it exists now. I mean, my friend Manny, he just did a feature with Gangsta Grass, and it's a hip hop group that combines bluegrass. And I've done collaborations everywhere. I did Floyd Fest with the Floyd Fest director in the mountains in Virginia. And I went to Floyd, Virginia, and worked with Americana, bluegrass, and
cool,
all of that kind of stuff. So it's possible to find the music and the storytelling. There's so much storytelling, and then there's so much hip hop theater that they can be exposed to as well. That's available.
Like Madlib went through all of Blue Note's recordings and remixed Blue Note's recordings with all the artists, talking about it. They're, not only emceeing, but the world of beat making, and there's a lot of interesting, material to share that might be of interest just
to people. Yeah. It's funny you should mention Gil Scott-Heron, because for anybody out there who watches Lovecraft Country, going back to this idea of introducing older generations to new music, or newer generations to older music, and Whitey on the Moon was featured in one of the episodes, which is a pretty powerful piece, and I have to admit it was right on point after the whole announcement about the space race, and
it's crazy.
Ooh, that's close. That's on the nose. But yeah, and then also shout out again to Senegal. Actually, for one of my classes, I show the video, or not video, it's a film called "I Bring What I Love" by Youssou N'Dour, about mixing, his faith with his music, right? And the students always it really makes them think, right, about this again. This how do you kind of pour yourself and pour your love and your faith, it's specifically religious faith, even into your music. So yeah.
A couple more questions.
We have a couple more questions. Yeah, you want to read that, Mike?
I'll go. Yeah. Dr. Teddy's back on. You were touching on this earlier, but could you say more about jazz musicians, especially bebop players and rappers, freestyle and improvisation, and the skill that it takes to be competent to express oneself in these music styles?
Well, yeah, it's funny. I was just giving a shout out in a piece I wrote to Dr. Arthur Dawkins, who he taught in School of Fine Arts at Howard University when I was an undergrad. And I actually took jazz history and appreciation because of this cute guy who thought we should both take it. That lasted about 2 weeks or whatever. I absolutely loved the class, and it blew my mind to know that this whole world of jazz was available to me. And then Ethelbert Miller, who was a cultural archivist at Howard and African American Resource Center, introduced me to the Black arts movement and all the literature. And then I started to read about the free jazz movement and some of the work of Ornette Coleman. And there were these journal articles and crispy paper that you had to go to the library with gloves on to read. And I dived all the way in. And that too became a part of the foundation of the work that I do. 3 of the MCs from Freestyle Union Cypher Workshop, Sub-Z, Terrence Nicholson, Kokai Walker, and Black Indian, ended up being selected to tour with Steve Coleman, the legendary saxophonist. Steve does all kind of experimentation, and he's a master of improvisation. And it was during that time that Sub-Z Terrence really introduced me to this approach to practicing, to freestyling with different time signatures. And so it was, we would use bebop and music that wasn't just 4/4 as well. And what it would do, it would build your skills almost like your muscles. Like if you were a martial artist, you would be able to do almost anything. And so you might not sound pretty doing it for a long time, but it sharpens you. It sharpens you. So when that old classic Run DMC beat drops, you can handle that. That's easy. But the connections are clear because it's about mastering your instrument, learning all the rules so that you can properly break them.
Yes.
Yes.
And that's that Miles Davis quote. You got to know the rules before you break them.
And also knowing that what you don't play is just as important as what you do play.
Yep.
And so the MC's understanding the nuances of when you're spitting and you're going and you're flowing. That pause beat letting that you know it.
Yeah.
You move it. And so being able to teach a 16-year-old that is something very beautiful. Professor Jared Shield pointed out to me at one of our Cypher workshops. He was like, you are teaching vibe, the science of vibe. Because we were in Harlem, it was a bunch of young MCs there. And I was just like, oh, am I? He was like, yeah.
Toni, let's do one more, if that's okay, before we say goodbye. And this is from a student of mine, Marshawn. Thank you for joining us, Marshawn. He says, hi, Miss Toni. Looking at hip-hop artists from the era that you grew up on and looking at today's hip-hop artists, which artists from today's hip-hop scene which artists would you say are continuing a legacy or mimicking the craft and dedication as it was viewed at that time? And specifically, how would you describe the female hip-hop artists out in today's scene?
Okay, wait, what's that? Toni, looking at hip-hop artists from the era that you grew up in, looking at today's hip-hop artists, which artists from today's hip-hop scene would you say are continuing? Okay. I think Kendrick Lamar is an obvious artist. I think there are a lot of artists. I like Kendrick Lamar. I love his kid, D-Smoke. And I've been checking out a whole bunch of new stuff, this Earth Gang and Spillage Village. There's a lot of good hip hop right now.
That's a lot. Yeah.
The same play in terms of mainstream media coverage. I wish that there were hip hop journalists and cats who would just take the reins of that for the love of the culture and do something different in terms of putting a spotlight. But there's so much talent and music being made. I think the second part of your question is and the same with women hip hop artists.
Yeah.
if you gave me like 20 minutes, I could come back with a list of 65 selling women in food
Right.
who recorded albums and during COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And then there were those who were working on albums last year. There's so many to listen to, and they're not crap rappers. And these, I'm talking about MCs. I'm not talking about the trap rappers. I'm not talking about the ones who rap about money and the power of what's between their legs. Like, I'm talking about those who are telling stories and really, really honing the craft of MCing. There is a lot available for listening, and it's unfortunate that the media tends to perpetuate the first lady syndrome as if there can only be one woman at a time.
I think that's an important point to pause on, just the influence of the media and its relationship to kind of corporate powers, that pigeonholes everything, when it's not just one thing, hip hop. There's so many, and a lot of it's happening in communities. A lot of it's happening in areas where it heals. And the healing takes place, and so it's up to everybody to kind of go out and find the rappers that resonate with them, because there's all sorts of messages out there.
Can I acknowledge Osinu's question about American artists coming?
Yeah, sure, please.
I know a lot of artists who have been coming to the continent of Africa. So you say Africa, or are you talking about your country? But I know a lot of artists who've been going back and forth and performing. COVID, there was a momentum from the beyond the return, the year we returned. There was a momentum that was building, and now COVID, the energy had to stop flat out. But I think that we were on the verge of a major shift in creating a global music community with different sounds. So hopefully, the internet will be our friend, and we'll use it properly so these connections can still continue to be built. But I'm hopeful for the future, and there are a lot of American artists that want to be in other parts of the world, including Africa.
Well, I think we're going to
say goodbye.
Say goodbye, unfortunately. And so I cannot thank you enough for your time. And like I said, I feel like you're just a gem, and that it's just this interview itself has been healing. I mean, just I hope that people who've tuned in really have been transported and kind of and had a moment to live in a Cypher right here with us this evening and with you. So I cannot thank you enough, and thank those of you who tuned in for watching.
Yeah, thank you for watching, and sorry about the technical difficulties, but we will post a video of this interview on the YouTube page, the John J. Cali School of Music, Montclair State University Facebook page, and on our YouTube page. So you can check that out on our YouTube page, and I'll post that in the link.
And follow Toni.
Instagram at Toni Blackman.
Yeah, exactly.
What's happening? We have a few plans coming up for the winter. I don't have dates yet exactly, but offering a lyrical meditation opportunity for anyone to participate. Hosting a few breakfast ciphers on IG Live, and then hosting a few conversations online. I really want to use hip hop to offer support for us to stay emotionally well, centered, and grounded.
Thank you again, and I'm gonna play "Why Worry" from Toni's hip hop meditation on our way out. And Kate and I will see you in February of 2001. We'll do an episode 3 of Is God Funky or What? And episode 3 will be with Dr. Hakeem Leonard, Associate Professor of Music Therapy and Assistant Provost for Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity, Conservatory Social Justice Leadership at Shenandoah University, where we're going to get back into it and talk about all the good stuff. So we look forward to that. And until then, bye, Kate.
Bye,
Toni.
Bye, Toni. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Peace.
Follow Toni.
Yes. And here's Why Worry.
Why worry?
Why worry?
Why worry? Why worry? Why worry? Why worry? Why worry?
Why worry?
Why worry? Why worry? Why worry? Why worry? Why worry?
Why worry?
Why worry? Why worry? Why worry? Why worry? Why worry?
Why worry?
Why worry?
If you want to keep it all going and energy flowing, we must remember and know worry does not make us strong. It just brings a negative on. It becomes like a prayer of all that we fear. Intention unclear, you be losing your hair and losing your sleep when your thoughts compete with your dream. When they're filled with worry, we lose patience and we're in a hurry, thinking ourselves into anxiety. Some will think you're crazy, cause you choose not to worry. Please let them be. Set yourself free. Manage your own energy emotionally. Faith without works just is dead. But there is no faith when you live in your head. Ha, ha, ha.
Why worry?
Why worry?
Why worry? Why worry? Why worry? Why worry? Why worry?
Why worry?
Why worry? Why worry? Why worry? Why worry? Why worry?
Why worry?
Why worry? Why worry? Why worry? Why worry? Why worry?
Why worry?
Why worry?
Why worry about the things where we have control? If we have control. Why worry about the things that we don't control? If we can't control. Peace without.